Hello and welcome to Game Design Hour. I'm your host, Miles Goldsmith, and on each episode of the podcast, I sit down with the people who create the video games you know and love. On today's episode, I'm interviewing one of the game developers behind the video game Gardenin. Gardenin is a relaxing video game where you get to grow plants and care for them. Without any further ado, let's meet our guest and get into the interview.
My name is Tommaso Verde. I am a game designer and co-founder of Dramatic Iceberg. I usually tend to supervise most of the business-related things here in our company. And I try also to help out a little bit about the design phases and process that we are, doing while developing the games. Yeah, that's most of the things that I do. And I try to keep the pieces together of everyone, I suppose.
So what was the first thing that sparked your interest in creating video games?
When I was very little, like 6 years old, my aunt had gifted me the Game Boy Advance SP and a copy of Pokemon Green Leaf Green or Green Leaf. And at that time, when I got it, I instantly became obsessed with the Game Boy. And, kind of something ticked inside me and was like, this is so cool. This is the coolest thing I have ever seen in my 6 years of my life. And at that point, I wanted to do something like grandiose, like maybe the firefighter or an archaeologist. And everything shifted and it became, I want to make video games. I want to learn how to make video games because this is the greatest thing ever. And from that point forward, kind of my road was set. And so while growing up, little by little, I tried to either study video game or understand them better. Did some programming and tried to explore the here in high school. We could choose, the kind of type of major or sector that you want to specialize in. And I easily took information technology and programming because I said, well, if I want to make video games, I'm gonna need to learn how to program, or I need to understand how this type of system work. And yeah, I guess from that point, it was just about I was needing to find other people and get some more knowledge about, more the hands-on process of what it takes to develop a game from 0, to 100. So yeah, it was just sort of a calling on my side, I suppose.
Awesome. So after that, how did you first go and get into the video game industry?
The first part was like a lot of research. So I started asking around to different people and tried reading, articles, books, and like one book that really kind of sold me on the idea of video games, either from a good side and from the bad side, was after I read Blood, Sweat, and Pixels by Jason Schreier. I think that's how it's pronounced. And that really meant me to like, okay, well, so the production of a video game is made by a lot of ups and a lot of down, and I need to get ready for that. And after that, there were a couple of friends who were writing games articles, and so I tried to get in touch with some other developers or some other people. And at the end, I landed essentially in a mailbox of one of the people who were working in a private school for a video game course. And he was like, well, if you want, you can come by and you can see what all this thing is about. And so I went. I previously was staying in La Spezia, and then I moved to Turin here in Italy, and I saw everything. I saw the course, I saw the people, and I was like, well, I think and I can afford this type of tuition, so I can try and make it happen this way. So I enrolled myself at the academy, and I took the game design course. And after 3 years and meeting a lot of people and getting a lot of experience in this sort of scholarship way, we essentially kind of decided that, well, yeah, it's cool. Let's make a team together. Let's make something together happen in a more professional manner. From that point forward, we actually started, pursuing video game as a professional career.
How did you first come up with the idea for Gardenin, and how did you go about starting the creation process of it?
So for gardening, the original idea and the creation process actually started during the COVID-19 pandemic. And we were working on another project, which was called Raccoon Legend of the Spirits. And that was our main project for a while. And where everyone was working from home, and we were on Discord a lot, and we were trying to, work how we could from this distance. We had the idea of like trying to grow some houseplants together, kind of like a hobby or like a shared experience. And I suppose that we really weren't too good about it because we actually grew and had some plans for a little while, but we were either engrossed in work or, in basically being absorbed by the computers that we didn't give them proper care, or just we didn't even know how to what type of care to give to these plants. So sadly, most of the plants that we had for that period just died out and dried out, and that was really sad, honestly. But one of our artists kind of sketched at one point, honestly, a really simple drawing about kind of this space where there were a lot of vases and plants, and there were all sorts of icons, like, you could there were plants growing, but you could also sell them, but there were also plants with insects and whatnot. And we were like, well, that's actually pretty cool, and it would be a pretty cool idea to have a sort of virtual garden in our computer that, where no plants could die, because we made the rules, and so the rules is that no plants dies. And from that point, we actually started developing it as a side project, just working on it casually whenever we had the chance. So slowly but surely we put something together. So there were a small room with some plants that we had created ourselves, and the rule was no plants could die. And at one point, we actually shared some footage, some screenshots of the game with some of our friends, just talking casually, and they were like, "Well, you know what? This actually sounds pretty cool, pretty chill to have as a game, as a companion game. You should try and develop it more." And so we actually decided to kind of switch projects. So let move our side projects to be our main one, and try to close it up as soon as we could, because it wasn't that big, but it still needed a lot of work to be done. And so from that point on, we actually started, producing gardening seriously. And so we made all the plants, all the rooms, and everything else that you, of course, would see inside the game. But that's the basic and how the idea started at the beginning.
That's really cool. So you said that before working on this game, you didn't know too much about growing plants and that sort of stuff. During the process of creating the game, what sort of research did you do into gardening different types of plants and just how to care for them?
So we actually have one member of our team who is actually really good with plants. So, and part of the idea of growing plants together was also kind of by him and with him. So we kind of had our gardener inside our development team. And so we started developing and researching things alongside him, and so studied how different plants would grow or how you could take care of them, and all sorts of dynamics. And we really became actually interested in how people would cross-pollinate between them. I'm not sure that's the correct word. And we were really kind of discovering these things as we were researching for the plants. And so we said, well, it would be really cool if we also could have plants hybridized together to create new types of plants. So it would be sort of something like scientific, but also just really easy, because we didn't want it to make it very hard for the player or generally really difficult. It was meant at the beginning to be something easy that you just could play like 30 minutes every day after work. So you didn't have to focus too much or just have it to be a challenge that you have to take on. So yeah, we did actually a bunch of research, mostly online and on some books, but it really helped us that Luca, one of the artists, was already pretty knowledgeable about plants. So that was our trump card.
Pretty much every game has interesting ideas that were brainstormed or thought about at one point, but just never ended up in the final version. What were some of those sort of interesting or strange ideas for Garden Inn?
So there isn't actually too much that was discarded for the game, but some other ideas, mainly the first one that was thought of and that was just scrapped, was the idea of having just a sort of creative mode that you would have everything unlocked and you would just, decorate this sort of diorama. You wouldn't have to care about growing time for the plants, and everything was just already unlocked. But at the end, we just said, well, you kind of are already doing something like that. It's not something that you would need to unlock or would need to power through in order to enjoy the game more. So at the end, we decided to scrap that in order to give space to things as like customize the room that you have, just having more freedom with the type of furnitures and decoration that you couldn't really currently have inside the game. But other than that, I must say that we actually didn't scrap much from the drawing board to the final game, actually. So like all the plants that are in the game were just the plants that we actually have prepared from the beginning. So no one was just scrapped from one point to the other. One thing that we were curious to make happen, but at the end decided not to, was to hybridize different typology of plants. So, water plants with air plants or ground plants with, just mixing between them. And we thought about it would be really cool because it would give to a more flexibility to everything, just create more combination, more exotic ones. But in the end, we thought it would be too confusing for the players overall to do something like that. And so we just stick to it, ground plants are with ground plants, air plants are with air plants, and just let's keep it rolling that way.
So the in-game time runs off of the real-world time, and growing times for plants take sometimes hours. Can you tell me a bit about the decision to make the game run off of real-world time instead of having a sort of like in-game clock and having stuff grow faster, like some other games do?
So it was something that we actually struggled a bit for the growing time, because one thing, as I said before, that we really were keen on was that the experience of growing something, it's not the same if you just speed up. It's just a 1 minute thing. You don't have the pleasure of seeing your plants grow day after day after day. And so even if they are just real life hours, which is still a bunch of time, we really wanted to recreate this sort of feeling of, day after day, I see progress, I see plants growing. And when I first plant the seed, I don't know what will come out. So the surprise will come after some time, after, I have taken care of my plants and I made sure that it stayed wet essentially and free of parasites. And at the beginning, it was actually that plants took way longer to grow. Like some plants would take 24 to 48 hours to grow, so like actual days. But that became clear after a while that it was actually too long to wait for some plants. And just even planting one could take even more than just 24 hours because when the plants become dry, they just stop growing. So if you don't log in, or if you notice that the plants, it just becomes dry when you're off, it just makes way, way longer. So it could take like a week for a plant to grow, but that's not fun. That's just, way too long time for to wait. So we decided to cut all the times down. And I think now the longest time for a plant is 12 hours or something, 9 to 12 hours. But we were really strong in this position. We really wanted that real time, and the idea of just having the plants grow slowly was something that it was meant to be essentially. Just having things go 5 minutes, 10 minutes wouldn't have made the same game.
Managing scope is a really important aspect of creating video games. How did you work to manage the scope of the game while you were working on it? And how did the scope change from your first initial idea to what you've now published?
So it was mostly due to time constraints. So we actually set out to scope things out because we really wanted to push out the game in a time period of 1 year and a half max. And that's a really short development time because, from 0 to 100, there are a lot of things behind it. And it actually really was our first commercial title that we were going to put out. So there were a lot of things to learn. So even just putting the game on a store and learn all the things that are behind the publishing a game, and even just finding a partner to support all the publishing ordeals. And so when we were actually going and searching for someone to collaborate with, a lot of people were like, well, that's too short. We can make it because you want the development cycle to end too quickly. But we were already basically halfway done, and we were just searching for funds to just improve the game even further, because the basic concept of the game was kind of done. Because you had all the plans, you had all the rooms, you had all the customization. We just needed to make it more. And so we said, okay, how many things can we make in 1 year? And do we think that there is enough content for the players to enjoy this type of game? Or do we feel like there are too little plans, or there aren't enough phases, or these sort of things? And that was also decided because either by talking with friends or with testers, we were like, do you really feel that there isn't enough content, or that there isn't enough things inside the game? Because if there isn't enough, we can make more. But the feature overall, they were decided, and we just said, let's stop at this, because the time frame that we want is just 1 year and a half. And so we need to make everything that it's in here doable. And there are a lot of things that we don't know how much time it will take, like publishing, localization, and whatnot. So let's try to keep it simple. Let's try to keep it doable, and let's try to challenge ourselves from a design and programming and artistical standpoint. But let's keep it doable. Not like, I'm not sure how long these things will take, because of course we could have done more complex things. But for the sake of basically everyone and the game, we decided to just keep it simple, essentially. But yeah, time was the big thing that decided the scope of the game.
What was your process for playtesting the game, and what sort of important information did you learn through playtesting?
When you are playtesting this sort of game, and the real problem that we had when trying to playtest this game was, playtest usually is from, okay, you have 4 hours and try as many things as you can, or try to reach the end of the level, or try to do these sort of things. With gardening, since the whole point of the game is just waiting, playtesting became really finicky to essentially do, because we needed to have playtester who were like, well, yeah, I'm going to play the game for like a week, and we need to kind of follow you and try to understand all the informations and the things that you are doing in the week that you are essentially playing the game outside our view, outside anything that we can control. So we made some adjustment and implemented some trackers in order to see like how many plants were the people growing, and how many at one point, because like you could grow like 500 plants at the same time, essentially. And we wanted to see if people were actually trying to do that. And the answer at the end was like, well, there are like 2 people out of 50 or 100 who actually did something like that. And so we realized that all the game was giving kind of the right information to the players who were like, okay, I'm going to try and grow what I can and what I'm interested in. It was not a process necessarily of optimization for most people. And there was a small percentage who actually tried to optimize essentially how many plants were growing, how many plants were getting hybridized at each moment. How many points am I racking up for unlocking new content, new rooms, and whatnot? And so thanks to this information, over the span of 1 week, we kind of got a picture of how people were playing the game. And luckily, they were playing it mostly how we intended it to, because doing these sort of things multiple times, other than taking time to prepare and then execute, it also takes some time to overall or analyze the type of informations that were gathered out. And we also were really curious to see how frequently people would log on inside the game to check on their plans, because that was like one of the big things. Do actually people log on multiple times to see how their plants are doing? Or is just like one every day or maybe once every 2 days? And luckily, at least from the playtests that we have done, we had saw either because it was from this 1 week and, it was a bit skewed as an information because, people they had this sort of task. They had to keep checking their plans, but they were doing it in, I think, after the second or third day in a very natural manner. So every now and then they were just checking it, not with pressure of, just continue to keeping an eye of the plans, but just opening the game for leisure and just, okay, well, has my plants grown? Do they need to be taken care of? Have I unlocked something new? Is there something, a new variety of seed that I have unlocked? Playtest was really a big thing because developing something that is so closely related to time was stressful because, we didn't know how players approach things and how players would react to real life, essentially waiting for it. But yeah, we managed it.
Which parts of gardening did you have to put the most time and effort into to get just the way you wanted it?
Probably how we have handled colliders of the different objects, because at first it was really rough and just item had rough colliders overall, and we weren't quite satisfied with it because a lot of plants are quite big and a lot of items are also quite small. But also we want you to decorate the room however you like. So it even placed tiny details all around the room were something that we really cared about because, it just, as the room were all inside, there are big things and small things. And we wanted to make sure that, you didn't feel like the colliders and objects were obstructing each other. And you had as much as freedom as you possibly could, but also that the items were kind of interesting in a way that were more than just, cupboard items that you would just place that as a decoration, but you could also interact with them or use them in a creative way to decorate or just do some funny things. Like the whole point that we made the Rubik's Cube rotate in different space was because we were like, it would be really funny if you could use the Rubik's Cube as a pixel and try to do some pixel art inside the game. And that was one of the part that we tried to push with the decorations inside the game, but also the colliders had to be on point in order to make this happen. So we really went back and forward with trying to tweak it in a way that we were satisfied with it. And after a while, things were pretty good, and I'd say they are also really functional as of right now. But that was a challenge nonetheless.
So how large was the team that created Gardening?
So the team overall was about 11 people, and not everyone was working full time on the project. Some people were working more on it than others, but everyone definitely did bring its own time and effort, and it actually shows. But most of the things were done by this group of 11 people in one way or another. There were also some other people who have helped us with smaller things like, writing some of the text and some of the translation. And I assure you they are not forgotten, but the main development team ended up being around this size.
Is there anything that you wish you knew before starting work on the game?
I don't know. I think that's a tough question. There were probably some more technical aspect that I wish we knew before starting on the game. And since we were just getting used to the Unreal Engine for making the game, there were some more technical difficulties that they would have saved us quite a bit of time if we had known ahead of time. But I don't think there is anything in particular that would have otherwise saved us quite a bit of time, either also from a perspective standpoint for the players. I don't know. I'm not quite sure right now, but something about along the lines of technical stuff for the Unreal Engine that was broken and needed to be fixed by us. So we still love the engine, but everything has some errors every now and then.
Can fans of the game expect to see any new content in the future?
Absolutely, yes. There is more content to come. We are doing the Nintendo Switch porting for the game. So if you want to take your plants on the go and just, relax in the park or relax in the beach, you will be able to do that. And more content is to come. So new plans and a bunch of new stuff. And yeah, we really want to try and keep updating the game every now and then with some new content. Just to keep it alive, but also us to keep it for a bit of in a selfish manner, also for ourselves. To have still keep updating it as our own garden, and which we're still adding content for everyone to play inside with. But yes, absolutely, more content to come.
What do you feel is the most difficult part of creating games?
It's always when and where to stop. I feel that can be shared among many developers. But when you start with the basic idea, it's very big, grandiose, and we're all going to do such amazing things. And there are hundreds of features that we have planned on, and hundreds of characters, animation, scripts, and everything essentially. But you kind of have to draw the line and decide, well, yeah, maybe there aren't going to be like hundreds of features. Maybe we can just have 10 things that are well made, well polished, that we are really proud of, and that the players can really enjoy playing with them or by using them. And yeah, it's not very easy, because you really wonder, because the possibilities are endless with video games, and just having to decide what things to keep and what to cut or just discard on the drawing board altogether. It's really difficult, but also just making the choice of it's good enough for the game. It's also something that's really difficult to do, or at least I feel that's really difficult to do, because it's easy to go on forever developing games and just keep adding stuff. But you have to stop somewhere, and for us it was really about time constraints. So we have this time, so let's try and fit everything inside this time slot. But if you had infinite time, probably then no game would come out, because everyone would just take their time and just say, well, we could add something interesting, like every time it rains, your character would just put out an umbrella or something that it's on paper, that's just really simple and just a cute addition to it. But then you have to go to the animator, and there are people who need to make the model, and the programmers just need to check, okay, it's raining, then we just need the character to have the umbrella out, and all those sort of things. So I really enjoy when inside the game you kind of see that there is a small detail that could have been cut, and it's still there, and it's still there for the players to enjoy.
Looking back now, is there anything you wish you could have done differently before the launch of the game?
I don't know, maybe just one of the things that I really like, and I think that's a bit missing just a bit, was either localize the game in more languages, just to make it more globally available to everyone, but also have this sort of like grandiose herbarium where there are all the information about our mystical plants that is currently missing from inside the game. So just adding a little bit more kind of lore or informations about the plants inside the game. Yeah, just try and make the game more available, and probably just give more options for the player to just reconfigure things the way they wanted to. Just minor adjustments really, but things that I feel would have made and would just improve the overall quality of life for the players to enjoy the game at its fullest. Well, we're still quite proud how the game came out for being our first project, and we're still very happy about it. I don't know if we could have done, like, from a promotional and mediatical standpoint more. Maybe yes, maybe no. not sure, but we're still very happy how it was received.
What do you feel is the biggest lesson that you learned from working on this game?
That different types of player will honestly enjoy different type of content and games, but from a very different standpoint. Like player A might just look at the game and say, well, it's a game where you wait. That sucks. And player B might look at the game and say, well, it's a game where you wait. That's neat. So really things about perspective and perception and how really different games are targeted towards completely different type of people, and how knowing what type of people you are trying to either to get players to play your game on, or just try to overall appeal to them, really changes the type of design and approach that you might have on certain features, certain things that you might want to develop. And I every day I still surprise myself, because I always notice now that, well, player A said that this game is cool because there are these features, but I played the same game and I'm also not enjoying the game for the same as exact features. So this sort of perspective really, from a developer standpoint, made it really clear that how much we are different and how much we also enjoy different games for different reasons. And so that really made us very, very well aware of the type of target audience and people who are out there, essentially.
What would be your biggest piece of advice to a newer game dev trying to go and create their first game?
The first thing usually I suggest is try and start small and just finish something. Just say, okay, I'm going to do 10 levels, and it's going to be a shooter, and it's going to be really cool, and try to make all the particle effects, and I'm going to learn a bunch of things. But then just set a goal, set a beginning and an end, because otherwise, if you're just going to keep wanting to add more stuff, and then it's never ending. And even if just another game that you add to the itch.io page, it shows that you stick with an idea, and it was like, let's beginning, and let's this sort of game, my game. And I know that what were the pillars and what I wanted to create, because of course also making game is a learning experience. So you could also approach it like, well, I'll try to make a game where I do all the sound effects, but do not swamp yourself in, well, I could make another 100 levels with all the content I made. Well, yes, you can. Well, yes, it's cool that you would try to do that, but otherwise you won't move forward with it. You'll just become stuck, and it's not cool not knowing when to stop things. And that's true. It was true for us. It's kind of true for everyone. But let's start with something simple. And it was true for our experience, like publishing gardening commercially. And it's definitely true to set a goal, try to reach it, and then just close it, declare it done. Let's try to move something else, and let's learn more new things.
What's next for you? What are you working on now?
We're working, as I said before, on the Switch porting for the game, and some new content, and some new unannounced project right now that we're just in the very early stages on. And I can wait to show some more progress about it. It's something that's a bit different from gardening, but I feel like at the core, the type of the experience is, I would say, similar in some ways. So, we're trying to stick with something that we have learned. There's not going to be any more real-time waiting, though, that I can assure you about that. But, something new for us.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. It's been great interviewing you.
Thank you for inviting me. It's actually been my pleasure.
That was the interview. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked the episode and want to hear more like it, make sure to follow and subscribe. It's different on every platform. Also, consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you want to stay up to date with everything going on with Game Design Hour, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok at Game Design Hour. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope I can see you next time.